And now we have breaking news from Kentucky, where police say there is an active shooter situation in the state's largest city, and there are, quote, multiple casualties.
It's Monday in America, multiple casualties at yet another mass shooting, this time in Louisville, Kentucky, at a bank even. So I guess schools are fortified. Up next is the banks. Thought they were. We'll get to that in a second, but at least 4 people have been murdered there, and another 9 injured inside that bank. And they point out that the culprit is potentially either a former or current employee. I guess they're still trying to figure that part out. The governor of the state, Andy Beshear, was talking about this, and it hits close to home, sadly.
This is awful. I have a very close friend that didn't make it today. And I have another close friend who didn't either, and one who's at the hospital that I hope is going to make it through. So when we talk about praying, I hope people will.
The pain you can hear in his voice as he talks about what all went down today, as then 4 people that were murdered, 1 apparently the governor knew. Sadly, I guess the governors can't necessarily go and create and craft and put together all the legislation for things that may prevent more things like this, but the legislators can. As soon as we saw what was the words from Beshear there, I was remembering how that last school shooting, at least the one in Tennessee, this Governor Bill Lee. And he had a similar story. Remember this?
Children woke up without parents, without teachers. Maria woke up this morning without one of her best friends, Cindy Peak. Cindy was supposed to come over to have dinner with Maria last night after she filled in as a substitute teacher yesterday at Covenant. Cindy and Maria and Catherine Kuntz were all teachers at the same school and have been family friends for decades.
Burbank, I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. And I've been saying for a while now, I said, once this starts, not that if, I said, once this starts hitting close home for the people in power, they'll probably have a different kind of response because they don't want to lose friends. They don't want to lose family. And then so the whole thing about we're not going to do anything, it's a casualty of just living in the most free country in the world. You just might die and not live there anymore. That things would actually begin to change. Maybe it's still in the works because this is all just a matter of the past 2-3 weeks from powerful people in power that maybe have some kind of influence on those legislators, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I would kind of expect that response that's very emotional to come with some kind of call to action, some kind of concrete policy. What are we going to do to prevent this in the future? But also, it's a good point, Jayar, that they probably won't do anything until this personally affects them. Interesting. That it's only affecting the governor there in Kentucky after it's a shooting in a bank. Maybe that says a lot about who our elected officials' friends are. But it's just sad that this is what it takes for them to get sad. You should be just as sad when it's children in a school, not when it's someone that you knew personally that was close with you. You should be just as upset when it's people in a mall, when it's people in any of our public institutions. I don't know at what point we're just going to call it some kind of diffuse civil war, all of these attacks on people when they're in public, in common places, in our institutions for education, banks. I don't know if I would call the mall a community space. It's a space for shopping, but it is to some extent a community space as well.
Yeah, and as you know what, and even you push the emotional line, if people connected to this, maybe they want to do something different. But if nothing else, if you're just a power-hungry politician, if people are like, yo, I will vote for you if you do something about this, you would think that they would want to do something about it. Again, these are governors, so they don't have the power to just legislate from just their own point of view, and that's the end of that. They have to have some kind of a backing with this. And a small point here, Beshear is also Democrat leading the state of Kentucky. Now, again, there's this point about the bank, and in case this stuck out to you guys the way it stuck out to me. Do you remember also last week, again, talking about what happened in that Tennessee school, afterwards at least, conservatives like Charlie Kirk were pointing out why these things don't happen in other places, completely falsely, but talking about these things don't happen in other places. Listen to the specifics of those places where he claimed these things don't happen and why.
We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year. People say, oh, Charlie, how do you stop school shootings? I don't know. How did we stop shootings at baseball games? How do we stop all the shootings at banks? We have armed guards outside of banks.
Do we? And if we do, did they stop this shooting today? Were there armed guards outside of the bank in Louisville, Kentucky, where 4 people lost their lives and another 9 were shot, and potentially more folks could die from the injuries? Did we? Are the armed guards helping us out? Because there's another idiot that likes to say these types of things too, which is only a ploy to kick the can down the road and do nothing about it. I don't know if we have the tweet up yet, but let's go ahead and read it. Ted Cruz tweeted this out afterwards. This is at the end of March. I think this did this on March 31st. He says, when you go to the bank and you deposit money in the bank, there are armed police officers at the bank. We get it. It's a bank. He said it 3 times in one sentence. Why? Because we want to protect the money that we save. Why on earth do we protect a stupid deposit more than our children? Good question. We have an opportunity right now to double the police officers on campus and keep kids safe. There's one thing he forgot to mention there, though, Burbank, that as he was talking about why we're not going to protect the stupid deposits in our banks, I have this feeling, I haven't looked at all the details of what went down in this bank today, but I'm not sure I heard about any robbery or any money coming out of that bank, just humans dying in this massacre in this bank. I'm not sure what the person was there for, but this whole protecting of the money is protected even if somebody comes up in the front, shoots the security guards, kicks in the door, and starts shooting customers as well. The money is not in the front next to the coffee and the water, because we are really protecting that stuff. And also, those things aren't humans. They're also not 5 to 17, 18-year-old kids either. But we don't look like we're protecting them either. It's all BS. And he has no intention of doing anything about it except to make these false comparisons that have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah, I don't know if Charlie Kirk's too familiar with the history of what's been going on in banks, but the reason bank robberies don't happen like they used to back in the day is not only because our ability to trace people with evidence, we have security cameras now that makes it a little bit more difficult, but also banks don't have huge reserves that you can easily rob like they used to. There's a whole host of measures for security that were put in place. Imagine that. They like to talk about gun control in America as if it's this dichotomy that you can either have guns or you can't. That's absolutely not the dichotomy that exists. No one's proposing a full ban on all guns. Charlie Kirk's like, well, there's going to be some cost if we want to have guns in America. There's a reason that it is popular among the American people to have common sense gun control, basic background checks, making it possible for us to have red flag laws if someone with a suspected mental health issue has access to a gun somewhere and there's some concern that they might do something, right? There's an in-between between we either have guns or we don't, and everybody's going to draw the line at a different place. All right, yes, we're going to have some gun deaths if we have access to guns as a society, but how much is too much, Charlie Kirk? Like, I'm not someone who's against people having guns. I'm looking at my Glock 17 Gen 5 right now. It's in the room with me. That doesn't mean that I don't want basic background checks and protections for people to have access to guns and for the militia that's guaranteed by our Second Amendment to be well regulated. There's an in-between here, and the policies are popular. There's a reason they're not getting passed by the representatives that are supposed to pass popular policies, and it's because they're funded by the NRA not to.
Yep, there is no in-between when it comes to the folks who are paying them to say these types of things. I think we've hit that point pretty much solidly. But again, it's not going to change unless enough people make it change.